So to understand that the guerrilla warfare was so unique, you have to understand how they fought in Europe, right? And it's kind of silly to think about it, but in Europe, there was a formalized way of fighting someone, right? You kind of go out in the middle of a field, you use your men and how you want to use them, okay? You would stand in lines, right, in orders, these long ordered lines. You have a group right behind you that's ready to step in front after you've fired your volleys of shots at the group while they reload. So it's really like you're in a line order shooting at the other group, right? In guerrilla warfare, the Native Americans and the French, they're like, hey, I ain't gonna die here, okay? They're gonna use cover. They're gonna shoot from the trees, right? They're not gonna stand with their, they're gonna hide, right? They're gonna take advantage of the environment. And the Europeans, like not really knowing how to do any other type of warfare, right, are thrown off. Right? This is going to give them the better opportunity to stay alive because they're using the environment to help them stay alive. Right? There's the guerrilla tactics. So they were hidden, small groups that were hidden against the British, whereas the British originally tried to fight in the open, ordered style used in Europe. In the long run, however, the British enjoyed significant advantages. So the British colonists outnumbered the French colonists by 20-1. So this is a major development here. Okay? And this almost always typically will decide an outcome of a war. Okay? So that is a positive, right? 20-1, right? They 20-1 outnumbered the French. Outnumbered the French. And so, again, not the opposite is there's right 1-20. French, British. Okay. And that all comes in part to the strategies that the British implemented in their colonies, right? The British actually established colonies. That's an advantage that they have going for them. They colonized the area, right? They're colonists. Whereas the French, they just had claims. Okay. So they had roots, and then the British. So the British colonists also had a subtle but significant advantage in that they had invested some material in the New World. They had roots in America, land, business, and families. Right? Many of the French, by contrast, were isolated traders and trappers who took products such as furs out of the New World, but put little into it. Above all, the British Navy could control the waterways, and thereby the French reinforcements cut off the French forces. So another British advantage is that they have a strong navy, and the world's greatest navy at this point in time. Okay, and the French were cut off, right? French were cut off. So let's look at that, right? Who in here has their own vehicle? Like their own vehicle? Who in here has like worked and paid for that vehicle themselves? Like it wasn't just a hand-me-down, it's like something you saved up to buy. Has anyone done that? Like you saved up, it's like this is my kind of vehicle I want to drive. Okay? If you did, right, what sort of vehicles would that be? What would you drive? If you could save up, if you could work through high school, and you could have a vehicle, what would it be?
Tesla truck.
What kind of truck?
Tesla truck.
A Tesla truck. Is it even out yet?
No.
No, not yet. Okay. Yeah, Laura?
A yellow bug.
A yellow bug, right? For me in high school, it was like a convertible Mustang. okay? I never, like, cared all that much about vehicles, but if I was gonna get one, it would have been like a Mustang, okay? Don't know why, just like them, I like how they looked, especially when I was in high school, like the look of them. But the reality of it was, I basically got a vehicle from my grandparents for $1, right? It was a 1996 Buick Pontiac, no, it was a Pontiac Grand Prix, right? Okay, and so that's what I drove to school. Cost me $1, and I really could care less really what happened to it, right? I didn't have much of an invested interest in someone driving Pontiac. Is that the joke?
Jake drives a Buick.
Oh, I drive a Buick. They're one of the nicest cars to drive. But anyway, right? When you earn something, when you invest in something, you're more willing to pay for it, right? So that's a major advantage that we're going to see come out of the colonies is that they have an invested interest in protecting their colonies. Right? Just as like you work for this your Tesla Cybertruck, right? And if anyone scratches that, well, most likely it would put damage on the other vehicle because I've seen those Tesla trucks. Like they're supposed to be able to like throw stuff at their windows and not break. But anyway, you get the point, right? You have an invested interest in your colonies, in your land, right? You have something to fight for. So there's that motivation that the French really didn't have. They didn't have colonies, right? They didn't have people living there in great numbers. So this is going to be a major advantage for them, right? And one of the possible solutions here that Benjamin Franklin comes up with, he comes up with this idea that, hey, you know, there's a lot of us different colonies out there. What if we came together as one kind of group, right? Yes, we're the British colonies, but we're separated from the British by thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. So on page 91, Benjamin Franklin suggests that the colonies unite. So the British lacked the unity, right? They lacked a sense of unity. So the Albany Congress attempted to establish a political unity when it met in Albany, New York, in June of 1754, about the time that the war broke out. Delegates from the other colonies north of Virginia attended the meeting. On the second day, Benjamin Franklin proposed that the Albany plan for centralized rule, including the president, chosen by the king, to be apportioned according to the amount of each colony contributed to the central treasury. The plan was finally rejected. However, because of the colonists feared it would establish a government that was too strongly centralized, many colonists feared centralized political control even more than they feared the French. So what we see in Albany is this first attempt ever to unite the colonies together, right? Later on, they're going to unite against the British to fight in the American Revolution, but there's this attempt, right, to unite them, to make them under one kind of central authority, right? And this plan was to allow for the British to have some input in their leadership. So, because of that, it was shut down, right? Earlier in the war in 1755, the British eliminated another potential disadvantage. The presence of some 6,000 Acadians, French Catholics, living in Nova Scotia. They worried the British. Very fearful of rebellion, the government uprooted the Acadians and forcibly moved them to the English colonies further south. A few Acadians even managed to escape and return to Nova Scotia. Many fled to French-held Louisiana, where their descendants became known as Cajuns. So those raging Cajuns down in Louisiana have that French background. Like many civilians in the midst of the war, the Acadians suffered as a result of opposing sides' fears. Okay. So we're starting to get an understanding of how the two sides shaped up, some of the advantages and disadvantages that took place in the French and Indian War. Right? We're going to look at one incident here, that led to, again, a major kind of understanding that we need better leaders in the colonies. We need better military leaders, because what we got here right now is just not good enough. So, yeah. Yep, Edward Braddock. Let's look at Edward Braddock. This will be the last section we cover. Okay, so Braddock's defeat. So Braddock came over, right? The early years of the war, disastrous for the British in North America, right? There wasn't that unity that they needed. There wasn't that good leadership. The government sent General Edward Braddock and 1,000 seasoned British troops to capture Fort Duquesne. Braddock was joined by the colonial forces and by Colonel Washington, who was eager to atone for his defeat at Fort Necessity. To move his men and supplies, Braddock painstakingly cut a road through the wooded wilderness and to a spot within a few miles of the French fort. Washington tried in vain to warn Braddock to the French Indians would not fight in the open. They would not fight in organized fashion that the general knew in Europe. On July 9th, 1755, the French and Indians attacked. They hid in trees and thick brush and poured deadly fire into the British ranks. The red-coated British regulars stood close, ordered lines, and braved the hail of bullets for 3 hours. And they said here, we would fight, one said, if we could see anybody to fight.